here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Simon Barber, who also goes by the name of Simon Chesterfield, he of the Chesterfields, that classic indie band from the 80s. And also they've done an album quite recently. And just to give you an update, the Precious Recordings of London are just releasing a Janice Long session from the 6th of January 1987. This is just coming out. And also Simon did an album a couple of, well, probably last year actually, which goes by the title of Simon Chesterfield. I'll put the links to these two in the notes below. But anyway, look, you're going to find out more about Simon, the Chesterfields and indie pop from the 80s. So look, after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Simon, we're waiting with bated breath.
Those years, everything changed when I grew up listening to the Beatles because my dad brought home every Beatles record the day it came out, and he was working in London, and it just seemed like he was part of this fantastic scene because he was in advertising. Right. And he used photographers that the Beatles used and all that sort of thing. So I felt connected in that way. And then the 70s, things got a bit for me, and it was like, I think I went into Acorn Records in Yeovil and I bought the latest John Miles single for some reason. And as I was walking out, Chris, who ran Acorn Records, I still bump into, he put on God Save the Queen, and that by the Sex Pistols, and that changed everything for me. I went back to the counter and I said, "Can I have that?" and swap it for this that I just bought. Yes. So that was my moment. So I took it home and then waited for my mother to go out and then just played it loud again and again and again. It felt like I'd been waiting for it.
Yes.
That summer I went to art college in Newport, South Wales, and suddenly I think that there's a moment when you find your gang as well sometimes. And so going to art college at the time that punk was happening and so I was very drawn to things like the Buzzcocks and the pop side of it, really, just because whatever the genre, I love a great pop song. It can be anything. It could be a girl band, it can be hip hop, it could be anything. If there's a great pop song, I'm drawn to it. And so it's that side of so the obsession with music started at art college, became more obsessed with music than art.
Yes. So your love of John Miles, which didn't last that long actually at that point, had he got a song called Music?
Yes, he put that out, and I was probably early teens when that happened. I think I got drawn in, and it's a bit. I mean, I don't know what I think of it now, but it was. I was also into Pilot, the band, who I still rate as a pop band, but punk came along to wipe away a lot of that. I think it was just the manufactured Mickey Mouse bands, and even though although I liked some Sweet songs, that sort of signed it, and I did like some Bowie and some T-Rex. There was stuff in there, but I knew that all that prog and all the album bands needed removing. I felt like I was part of that movement. The Year Zero, that's why it felt like being part of. Starting again, so pretending that you didn't like the Beatles or that, because wasn't Glenn Matlock kicked out of the section supposedly because he liked the Beatles and ABBA or something? But I loved the Beatles still more than any other. Nobody's replaced the Beatles for me. So.
Well, I was always intrigued because I had the older brother moment, which was he was 7 years older, and so he started getting his record collection in the early 70s. It was interesting. You went to art school. He was much more into accountancy and maths, and thus it was prog rock. It was such a cliche, but it's all there.
Yeah.
But he did have the Sgt. Pepper, and he did have Goodbye Yellow Brick Road and a Deep Purple and a Black Sabbath. But then it was just prog-tastic stuff. And I must admit, I was fascinated with all these new sounds and would listen to them kind of, with intrigue and I've gone back and listened to some of it and thought, blimey, this is quite this is quite tedious. But, some of it, there's moments of yes.
Oh.
There's a song called Into the Heart of the Sunrise, which it's only 11 minutes, but you listen to the last 2 minutes, it's really exciting, but you've got to go through 9 minutes of absolute boredom.
I'm sure I feel differently about it all now, but I think it was a cultural thing as much as anything, and a sort of a youth, a young thing.
Yes, it was very removed because there was the Emerson, Lake and Palmer that I remember John Peel famously said was a waste of electricity. And I have to say I've used that quite a few times in my life.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that older brother, older sister thing is quite a crucial thing with a lot of people. I didn't have an older brother or sister, so I always felt like I had to find my own thing, and I didn't have help. So I think, discovering punk, and in particular also the Jam in the early days, and then finding out that I was born the day before Paul Weller probably in the same hospital, I made a connection that way as well with that. I felt like, oh, right, yeah, this is my generation. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. And did you, at that stage, when we're going to art school, obviously, had you just gone to, I don't know, O levels or CSE, I think, or GCSEs, or had you gone to an A level in art?
I'd done A levels, and I didn't get them all, so I did an art foundation course. I wanted to be a teacher, but the A level results didn't let me go. I was going to go back to Portsmouth and teacher training college, but I didn't get enough A levels. I was too young to do all that, really, and so I did arts in the family. I did the art foundation course and ended up in Newport. So it was sort of.
So was that a 3-year after the foundation? Was that a 3-year fine art course you did?
No, after that, yeah. So the foundation was 1 year in Yeovil, and then it was a 3-year degree course in Newport, South Wales.
God, it was, and this would have been the times of grants, and I remember my brother.
Yes.
Was able to sort of even sign on in the summer, Christmas and Easter period, but they couldn't be bothered because it's like, well, that's a lot of effort.
I never had to work, and although I did work in the summer when I came back. There's a sort of hospital here. I was a nurse every summer, but I remember blowing my 3rd year grant as soon as I got it on a drum kit, because I started by drumming. I was drumming in 3 bands at art college. I couldn't carry it, and then that became a different. Then it became, I need to influence the songs. When I came home again and started playing in bands down this way, it's frustrating.
So did your degree saddle the 70s and 80s then? Did you finish in 82 or 81?
No, I finished in 80. So 70 to 80, yeah.
God, so you had 4 glorious years with
Oh, they were glorious. It was like we had a punk club in Newport every Wednesday night. It was the Stowaway Club. We'd be there every Wednesday night, and there was a great band every week. I saw everybody. And then a weekend into Cardiff, Friday and Saturday night into Cardiff, go-to gigs. I was just completely obsessed. If I look at my diary now, from those years, I can't believe what I did. And I can't believe I was allowed to stay at art college for 3 years, because I didn't really, as my mum would say, apply myself or that sort of thing.
Yes, it was.
Go home either, which probably I realise now was probably quite upsetting for my parents, particularly my mum.
Well, I know, but it must have been a great time, and also there was a lot to sort of, apart from not having to have any financial debt and not having any, financial worries, there was always enough little protests to do, wasn't there? And enough dressing up to happen and experimentation with anything that you wanted. Slightly looks quite innocent now, doesn't it? But on saying that, when you finished, Thatcher had got in, then there was the next part, which was the Falkland War and the miners' crisis. So society suddenly felt a little bit like it does now, doesn't it? With like, my God, there's this leader who's going to be absolutely,
things definitely got so by 80, things definitely seemed more serious, and I think we were more too. But I mean, even years before that, we got involved in Rock Against Racism. We had free buses going up from Newport to the Clash, see the Clash and Tom Robinson Band, and in London, marched from Trafalgar Square to, was it Victoria Park? So I was part of that. I felt like I was in amongst the whole scene. It was very, very exciting, and
Yes.
carried on being obsessed with music.
But then sort of 80, 81, what happens then? Sort of, because obviously there's like a lot of chapters. You think, well, that's the end of that, and now I'm in my 20s. What do you do next until
Yeah, I think you become a new romantic and wait for the Smiths, not knowing that they're coming, but surely something's coming.
Something's happening.
I think because when Davey and I got together, so Davey was in punk bands as well, also punky bands in the Yeovil area, and we were in different bands. And then eventually in '84, people go away all the time. They go to college, university, and we ended up as all right, well, we might as well try it then. So we sussed each other out to see if it was worth doing.
Yes. Had you made the change from drums?
Yes, I'd played in a band. I did that quite quickly when I came back from art college because I realized I came back and I was drumming for a band, can't remember what their name, with my new best friend, Mike Top, who was a guitarist, who was into John McGeoch, and all, he was into magazine and the Banshees and stuff like that. So, which is what I was into at the time. And I was into that sort of drumming. And then but it was still, it was always frustrating that I couldn't write the songs from the position of being behind the drum kit.
Yes.
I tried in one band. I was drumming and singing in one band. I was in Scarlet Downs, one of the singers. And yeah, so the bass player didn't turn up for a rehearsal. I remember we were in someone's cellar somewhere in Sherborne, and the bass was there and the bass amp was there. And so this guy didn't turn up. And so I picked up the bass and I thought maybe bass is my way in because at least it's rhythmic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it started, really. I learnt what I thought had been this other bass player's best bass line. I realized that's really easy. So I think I was sitting there. I think I was sat on the drum stool and I was still doing the bass drum beat on my right foot, but I was playing the bass. And then, that was the start of that, really. And immediately, I think Mike realized that we needed to be writing. So that became that was my sort of writing duo. Because when you play the bass and write, it's quite a different thing.
Right.
Guitar and writing, because you're playing sort of single note things, and it's still unusual, I think, to sort of start with a bass line and a melody, and that's still what I'm doing. And I've been told by people who understand music better than I do, that actually it seems to really work for me. That's how my song ideas arrive. So I've sort of stuck to it, and I still don't know what some of the notes are, and I still don't know. I could never play in a covers band or in. People can't shout out like, "Oh, this is in E," or "This is in something like that." That's not how I work.
Right.
Sort of more from the sort of Peter Hook school of bass playing, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes. And as a sort of the creative journey, at that stage, electronic music was starting to develop quite fast.
Yeah.
And that was suddenly becoming like, this is it, Soft Cell, Depeche Mode.
We had a synthesizer in that group. That was after Mike and I started writing songs. We knew we had to get a keyboard player in because we were into Ultravox, early Ultravox.
Yes.
Not the Midge, your Ultravox. But yeah, so they were sort of our model, that sort of, yeah. So we knew this guy who'd built a synthesizer. We sort of tried it with that. That was very weird. And then eventually he was playing, he got like a Wasp synthesizer or something like that. And
were you quite curious with that whole new romantic electronic sound?
Yeah.
You didn't dismiss it as like frivolous nonsense?
No, because again, some great pop songs came out there, like you mentioned, Depeche Mode and things. I think the Human League, great. I love that first Human League, the pop version of the Human League. Although I really like the early Human League.
Yes.
Before they split. down the middle. That was great. So yeah, we were listening to all that sort of experimental stuff as well. We wanted what we did to have an edge, but to still be pop music. And I think that's where all my favourite stuff comes from. And I think particularly, yeah, and I think the art college sensibility helps in that direction, because I think you're always looking sideways instead of that way, if that makes any sort of sense.
Well, I think that, because obviously there's a lot of excitement at the moment because, it's a huge exhibition, isn't there? Lee Bowery at the V&A, and,
Mm.
the book has been sort of published again, Sue Tilley. And, there was just an awful lot of dressing up, and, Boy George, has brought out an autobiography recently. And, it's just, I think a lot of people have become quite fascinated again with
Yeah,
that kind of scene. And if you were at art school, you wouldn't have feared that kind of look and those styles and some of those attitudes
yeah.
as well. The
I
Blitz
mean, I
kids.
also I did feel a connection with that, because the club I was telling you about in Newport, and Steve Strange was our DJ, because he's
Right.
from that neck of the woods, before he moved to London, and then of course the whole Blitz scene and that sort of thing happened. But he actually met, I think this is true, at when the Rich Kids came and played our club, who I was a big fan of. I think he met Rusty Egan and Midge Ure at that gig. And I think that was the start of Visage.
Which was quite interesting because there was mostly quite a few members of magazine in Visage,
And
wasn't
they were in there as well. Yeah, yeah. Brilliant.
because I did an interview with,
Yeah.
I think, the keyboard player, and there
Dave
was like,
Formula. Yeah.
yes, it was, yes, that's the
Oh,
man.
did you? Yeah.
And it
He's
was just
doing
really,
something again at the moment. I think he's playing with a French band at the moment.
yeah, he might be. I think he was also, I think he's now in America somewhere. A few people have sort of gravitated towards the Joshua Tree area. I think it's probably very cheap. There's a guy called Durwood who was in the Billy Idol band.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Remember that name. Yeah.
I remember that, well, I don't know what the Billy Idol, perhaps it was just Billy. But anyway, he was a guitarist and he lives in one of those shacks in that area. And yeah, Dave Formula, I think he was just has a regular night, at a bar somewhere. And he said, oh, yeah, Nick Lowe's going to be there with me in a couple of weeks' time. We'll have,
Brilliant.
I think, God, that would be amazing, wouldn't you? Just pop into a bar, see this guy. Oh, that's
Yeah.
Nick Lowe, and they'll just knock out a few numbers. So I think a few musicians have got that lifestyle now. And
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
a nice thing, and a lot of members from people like, I don't know, Dream Syndicate and people like Steve Wynn. And again, didn't make a huge amount of money, or if they did, they spent it all. And they sort of live in these kind of quite remote shacks, sort of
Yeah.
kind of just making a living and writing their memoirs and doing a few
It's great. I
acoustic
love that. I
nights.
love to hear that. I love that people just can't stop.
Yes.
I feel I can't. Maybe I should be. You know, I get a pension now, David, and I still don't. I still think I'm singing better than I ever did. I still think the ideas are still
Well,
landing.
actually, doing, just as an aside, but having done this show and these interviews for so long, it is quite interesting, just at how passionate people were when they were doing the music, and now they're still passionate after having to do various other things, sometimes between A and B, time-wise, that making music again has just really made them happy. They've got their studio. I mean, I did an interview actually last night with Amy Rigby, who then sort of is with Reckless Eric.
Oh, right. Wow. Yeah.
And he decided to, quit New York and bring his studio. Now they're in North Walsham in Norfolk, and he's got his studio, and they're going to be, doing the next album and the next
Yeah.
album and the next little gig here and there. It's just,
Yeah.
everyone's, they're all still doing it, and they're thinking, yeah,
And
this
there's a
is.
bit that, the kids have left us a bit more room as well, because they're not all doing it like we were. Well, there's certainly
Yes.
not enough of them doing it. Anyway.
I know it's a crowded. So then, yes, you mentioned the band, didn't you? 1983, the Smiths appear. What was that
Yeah.
moment like?
Oh, that show. I remember my friend. I had a friend, Steve Ball, who got very involved in putting gigs on and doing a fanzine in our area. He was brilliant, and he was the guy, sort of bringing, he I think he had the first 10 records on Creation, and he had, he was right, buying all the fanzines and that sort of thing. I mean, I was too, but he was really. But I remember, yeah, I think it was him brought Hand in Glove to my flat, and that really felt like a change. I think I'd heard something on John Peel, but it was the thing, it was the artifact and the record, and already establishing the style of what the sleeves were going to look like, because that's important to me too, is the aesthetic. And then, yeah, so the Smiths were sort of, when Davey and I started the band, the Smiths were still, still together. They hadn't even made probably hadn't even made Meters Murder yet. And so they were in our thoughts. Orange Juice were in our thoughts. Go-Betweens were in our thoughts. That's where we connected. It was those bands. It was indie labels, and it was that aesthetic, and those songs, really.
Yes. Had you embraced that world of those classic black and white films from the 50s, 60s, the kitchen sink dramas?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you recognise the lines from like the films that Morrissey nicked quite a few, didn't he? It was
yes,
definitely, and I think that encouraged us to as well. We've probably nicked a few of those, although Davey never needed to nick a line from anywhere because every line he wrote was superb.
yes. Well, it was just kind of interesting. I think being, for me, the angsty 80s, feeling very sort of serious and sort of like moody. Not because I wanted to, but I think it was just very, slipped
I
in
do
a
love
certain...
that joyous miserableism in a band or in a song.
romantic melancholia.
Yeah,
That we loved
to
it.
wallow. That's what I hoped I was doing with this album last year. I picked the strings album. I picked 6 of my songs that I could most wallow in. I love
Yes.
the line, "Last night I dreamt that somebody loved me." That whole, actually that whole verse, but it's that's I connect with that more than probably anything anyone's ever written. It's yeah, and I really, so yeah, it meant a lot to me. I can't bear to think about him now, but
No, well, that's
totally,
another thing that we can process in our
yeah,
lives. And
I totally bought into that, everything to do with it. Yeah.
yes. So then when did you and Davey, were you the two driving force behind
Yeah,
this?
so I I phoned him he was working at a printer's in Yeovil. I phoned him up because that was how you contacted each other in those days. I phoned him up at work and said, should we meet up? Maybe we should get a band together. And he said, yeah, come round. So he told me, I went round one afternoon. He said, he said, bring beers and records, not a bass or anything like that. That didn't happen then.
Right.
He wanted to see, yeah, he wanted us to get to know each other. It was brilliant, really, because I was there hours, and I was playing him records, he was playing me records, and we just started. Now, without calling it a manifesto, we started thinking about what we wanted it to be. And what we wanted it to be, that neither of us, and this is mad considering what happened with the Chesterfields, we didn't feel we were the singer. We wanted to write the songs. The Smiths had just done the single with Sandy Shaw.
Right.
And I don't know if Dave, you felt that so much, but I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if there was a band like that all the time? A band that sounded like the Smiths, but with a girl singer. And so that's what we want to come. So we both started, and actually I was writing I just didn't realize at that time. I'd written songs in the previous bands, words and lyrics in previous bands I'd been in. And so it started off that he was writing the music, the guitar. And I mean, actually, some of the songs did start with bass lines. But I was going to write the lyrics. So that's how we started. So probably the first 5 or 6 songs were like that. And then he sort of he didn't even push it, suggested this song he'd written called "What's Your Perversion."
Right.
By that time, we had Sarah, a friend of ours, singing. and that arrived in the set. And then on it, when we demoed it, he sang the outro at the end. It's a mess, a mess. That sounded great. And then we did another demo, and Sarah couldn't make it. We did probably 7 or 8 gigs with Sarah singing, maybe not as many as that. And it went really well. And we quite quickly started building up a local audience, and people coming, oh, got to come and see you again, that sort of thing. And people already started traveling to our gigs, you know. So it felt like something was happening. Then Sarah, who we always knew Sarah was going to go away. She was at school and she was going to go away to architecture, to study architecture. And she's now really well respected, a very successful architect. She couldn't stay for one of the recordings because it was her grandmother's birthday. So she left. And Basti, our sound engineer, just said to David, why don't you go in and sing? Why don't you go in and sing?
Right.
He goes, just put the vocal down so that Sarah knows what it's going to be. So I can't even remember even which song it was, but Davey went in and sang, and we all just looked at each other, and that's when I realised that Davey had to be the singer, and also there was the lyrics. The realization that actually he'd got a lovely way with words, and if you know, that was a slight turn. I don't think Sarah was that disappointed when we dropped her. We did get her back for one gig because we weren't ready for Dave. That was funny, so we had to go back. So we weren't ready. So Davey became the singer. So Dom was already our drummer.
Yes.
He was 14 at the time. And so when Sarah left and Davey sort of stepped up to be the singer, we knew we had to find another guitarist. So that's when the search started, and we tried so many people, and eventually landed on Brendan, who plays on the first Chesterfields album. And he brought the songs that Davey wrote with Brendan, sort of around, so there'd be songs like Best of Friends, Sweet Revenge. There's like a few around that time, because Brendan, I think, moved into Davey's flat, and they were just sort of sitting around, sort of playing guitars together. And so there was like a period of time, it was only probably a few months, when those songs were like another step up. That's where Davey was sort of discovering his love of you know, lyric writing and saying
Yeah, because I can remember, which is amazing, isn't it? 40 years ago, I remember when John Peel played "What's Your Perversion," because he said something at the end of it, which was, you know, the way he delivered a line, which you probably would know, because hopefully you'd have a recording of it, like referring to at his age, he wouldn't be able to have such pleasures in life anymore, or something like that. I can't remember, but I do remember I'd often listen to his show, and sometimes, mostly there was 1 or 2 songs you thought, oh, that's great. But mostly I would just sort of remember the stories in between. And I found a lot about his family and where they were going on holiday as well, which I found quite fascinating as well, that he went to one hot family holiday. They wanted to go to the factory that made their fridge or something. And something very romantic. So what's your perversion? When did you record that? When did that?
Well, there must have been. So when we did this, it was a new song, because when we recorded the Janice Long session, we'd started recording the Kettle album with John Parish.
Yes.
John plays on this as well, disguised as Scott Tracey. And John suggested these 4 songs because we've been rehearsing them with John. And John had also started teaching, because he's a phenomenal guitar and drum teacher. He started teaching Dom drums. And so I think he thought these 4 songs were the best at that time, the most ready, if you see what I mean. So actually, it must have been written that summer of '86, something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of the the Kettle songs they all came together at that time. So Kettle is probably half the songs that we were doing with Sarah that Davey took on the vocals. So there are versions of several of those songs that are demoed with Sarah singing on.
Yes. So
Yeah.
it says here that it was the 9th of September 1986. What's Your Perversion?
Right.
Was that when he played it then?
Well, this was recorded in December '86. So it might be that was when we. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where you're reading that from.
That was it's something called the John Peel wiki page of someone's put together. So
he must have played that. So he would have played that from the Guitar in Your Bath EP. Yeah.
Yes, in brackets, 7-inch single, Guitar in Your Bath, Subway Organisation. So,
right, yes, of course, because What's Your Perversion wasn't on Kettle. It was on that EP. So we must have done that because those two songs, What's Your Perversion and Love Mountain, must have been chosen because we'd recorded them before.
Yes, because he played Nose Out of Joint, Sweet Revenge, and then What's Your Perversion? Were they all the B-sides to a Guitar in Your Bath then?
Nose Out of Joint was a flexi.
Oh, with the shop assistants.
Yes, so I think John Peel definitely played that a few times, I think, as did Janice. So that would have been the flexi because we recorded Nose Out of Joint again around the time we recorded this, the Janice Long session for Kettle.
Yes, God, it's just a very intense, because it was a bit of a glory period for the indie pop sound, wasn't it? Because you had
it was such a thrilling time.
Because it was like you had it was like the platinum card of indie, wasn't it? Like you had the June Brides, the Brilliant Corners, the Sidleys, who were just and I think they were produced by John Parish as well. I mean, his CV during the 80s is quite amazing.
I think he did the Brilliant Corners, something for them, and I think he did Caretaker Race. He certainly did, and a few others. Yeah, the Beat Hotel. Yeah, he was a bit of a go-to producer at that time for a lot of those bands.
How come you never did a session for John Peel? You did
because Janice Long. When Sweet Revenge came out, Janice Long played it every night for 2 weeks, and then wanted to be the first to offer as a session, which is what this is. And so John Peel, Peel still played our records and everything, and he was very supportive. But he thought of us as a Janice Long band. He told our then manager that he really didn't need to help us because Janice was playing us all the time. So so I think maybe, I don't know how it was between them, but I think maybe he let Janice have a few bands. I know it was the same with the Loft. I remember Andy Strickland telling me a similar story we'd had, because we're getting so much airplay and support from Janice Long, that he didn't need to because there were so many other people that he could be.
Yes,
it would have been nice to have done a John Peel session. It's got more. I think probably got more kudos with some people, but no, we're very happy because Janice Long changed everything for us.
Well, absolutely. And also, I mean, she probably had a bigger listening audience as well as, time.
Probably, yeah.
I would have thought so, really. I mean, John Peel was always a little bit under threat from management, wasn't he? Now we look back and go, oh, marvellous. But at the time, I think they were wondering what to do with him. And he was constantly getting shuffled around on his slot and getting squeezed. I think they were probably thinking, look, we've got Steve Wright in the afternoon, Bruno Brooks, Simon Wright, with his happy love songs of tragedy of people dying after their wedding. What was that called? That awful thing that he used to do in the afternoon? Your Song or something,
Oh, yeah. It was Your Tune or something.
Your Tune, yes. And it was always about somebody getting together, finding true love, and then she went to the doctors and she was dead later that day. And this is their song. And
the music's coming back to me now, so stop it.
God, I know. It's awful, isn't it? I know, it's just the 80s was so marvellous. Well, not daytime Radio 1, though. So with Janice Long, how did that session, how does it compare to a, do you go to Maida Vale and have Dale Griffin sort of
Oh, yeah.
giving
Yes.
you a hard time and thinking, what the hell are you lot doing?
No, we did. Well, we were lucky that we took John. John steadied our nerves, counted Dom in for every song, and obviously that was like Dale Griffin, great drummer, and you're sort of in awe of him because you know about Mott the Hoople. But John was, and I say it to a lot of people, he was our grown up in the room. So we had our great drummer, and Dom was becoming a great drummer at the same time. So it's like we had these three drummers there,
Yes.
making it work. And then John does play a lot of percussion on this session as well. So,
right. God, that's all good. And who was your manager at this stage?
We had, her name was Louise Royston, or Den, Denn, as we called her, and she worked for RCA Records. And she was someone who we knew through John, actually. She saw us, loved us, and I think she was helping John do some things with his band Automatic Lamini. But when she saw the Chesterfields, she said, I really need to manage you. And so, so she made a lot of those early things. So she had connections, but it wasn't just because she was working for RCA didn't mean that she could open up doors or use her contacts. In a way, maybe she couldn't because of that. But I've found so many letters from her and recently, because I've been having a massive tidy up. She was just on it all the time, sending us, because it was all by post, sending letters and itineraries. I've just spoken to so-and-so, Janice's producer. I've just done this. I've just organised you a gig at the Bull and Gate. You're supporting so-and-so and so-and-so, that sort of thing. She was brilliant.
My God. Yeah. So what happened to Den? Is she still about?
I really would love to know. John, I think last time I asked John, he said she was in America. But we changed managers a couple of times.
Excellent.
We should never have stopped. Den should have carried on being our manager, really.
It wasn't the Morrissey syndrome, was it? The Smiths. They could never get a manager, could they?
No, that's true. No, there was nothing like that. I think no, we loved her, and I think she loved us. I think there was. I think maybe we thought that we needed to, because we'd suddenly got publishing and an agent, and it was becoming a lot more relentless. We were so busy that maybe it was just too much for her. Maybe we realized that. And then this somebody else came along and offered to be our day-to-day manager and drive us around, and also invest in the band. So I think we went with that for a while. That didn't work out. That's a whole other podcast. And then we were approached by Steve Morton, who's actually, who managed us until we split up.
Yes,
so he negotiated.
So were you doing these kind of, because it's a kind of a great time, one obviously doesn't realise that when you're in it, but you know the wonderful world that was, Janice Long, John Peel, even Kid Jensen in a way, the weekly music papers with a huge circulation, and obviously then every town, city has an alternative indie night, don't they? So you can just plug into this fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes or very often run by the guy who does the fanzine.
Yes.
The guy who does the local fanzine. He's connected to the guy who puts the gigs on. That totally underground network.
It was the same with Norwich. I mean, they just had somebody who obviously had gone up to the people at the art centre and said, can I do an indie night? And they went, well,
There's that guy. There's a guy called Barry, wasn't there?
Yes, Barry Newman.
Who did Wild Club, because my band after the Chesterfields, Passenger, put out a record on his label. And we came and played the art centre. I think he was putting gigs on there.
So were you doing a kind of a tour of some, or were you doing just kind of hits here and come back? And I mean, did you sort of have an itinerary and think, right, we're going to be on tour for 2 weeks, or was it a bit more organic at that stage for an indie band?
So we were around the time. I mean, I say that everything changed with Janice Long, but it also everything changed, just went up. Things went up notches quite quickly. So Janice Long, suddenly after that, we were getting all those indie club gigs, getting all the letters asking for fanzine interviews and all that sort of thing. It was that level.
Yeah.
Then Johnny D changed things again, with Kettle following soon after. So that very quickly we had an agent who was putting us on the college circuit. So we went from a band that was supporting lots of great bands, and we were enjoying that.
Yes.
No pressure. You go and support Primal Scream, you support the Railway Children or James or anything like that. That was brilliant because we were playing big venues. But that didn't last very long because we suddenly very quickly became a headline band on the college circuit, and that was really exciting. But obviously, there's sort of a lot more pressure. But we were out there. We were playing gigs most weeks, and then there'd be little runs of like a week or two and that sort of thing coming back. There's quite on the agency had things quite well organized. So it was, yeah, we lived off it then for a couple of years.
Yes. And can you remember, because with the album Kettle that came out in 87, did you go in the studio and record the whole album, or did you get tracks that you'd recorded before?
No, we did record it as an album, but we added completely and utterly to it at the end. So it was a few sessions. It wasn't like, it was over a few weekends, but it was all at the same studio and with the same sounds and everything. It was, it was recorded as an album.
And was John Parish the producer for the album?
Yeah, with John Parish, yeah.
Genius.
And we probably weren't going to put Completely and Utterly on the album, but I think probably the label, or maybe Martin thought that was a good idea. So we put both the singles on the album because I was also into that thing of singles not being on albums, that sort of thing, because I loved the single as an artifact. But yeah, it made sense because people bought it because it had Johnny D on and Completely and Utterly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But not What's Your Perversion?
No, because that had appeared on the Westward Ho compilation that Martin had done, compilation album. That came out similar time to Kettle. So that was the first EP and 2 singles. So that was 8 songs. That was the songs from the 3 Subway 7-inches were put together on the Westward Ho album.
Yes.
And it was all happening so quickly that we didn't have a sleeve artwork for that. So we just turned the Completely and Utterly artwork into a black and white image. Just chose the only town in the country that had an exclamation mark in it as a title, and it was just bang, bang. We made I don't know if you saw it. We recently posted a video for Sweet Revenge on our YouTube channel. We made that for when Sweet Revenge came out, but everything happened so fast, and we're doing gigs and everything. We never had time to edit it. And then it just got put away because Completely and Utterly came out, and then Johnny D came out, and everything was moving so fast.
Yes.
And those labels were a lot of those labels were putting things out really quickly, which made it really exciting. So you'd write, like Johnny D was written and recorded and came out in a matter of months. Because we pretty much recorded it soon after we'd written it, because Martin heard it and said, that's got to be a single, and got us in the studio. We did that. So you think about like a couple of years ago, I know it's changed now, but bands were waiting like 9 months for a pressing plant to turn their vinyl round because there weren't enough pressing plants anymore. I think that's got a lot better. A friend of mine runs a label called Spin Out Nuggets.
Oh, yes, vaguely come across that.
And he's fantastic energy. He's another Nick, really. Puts out a lot of records, but he can turn things round really quickly. now, but I think a few years ago um, he was struggling to get things turned around.
Yes, the cash flow would have been tricky one at that time.
Oh yeah,
So can you remember how Ask Johnny D comes about? I mean, the writing and then the recording process, because that is
yeah.
an
Well, that was
amazing
a
song.
changing point for me in the Chesterfields because up until that point, I'd sung bits and pieces on songs. So I'd written lyrics, but Davey was singing them. Um, and we'd become friends with Johnny D, who ran a club in Brighton.
Right.
Loved him, and he loved us. And he had a birthday gig in Brighton. He invited us to play his birthday gig in Brighton. And Davey and Brandon, when they'd been living together, had got this guitar tune. It was just the four chords of the verse. And I had it on a cassette. Davey had said, "We've got this, but we don't know what to do with it." So I had that on cassette, and worked out the bass line, and then this gig was coming up, and I thought it'd be really great to play Johnny D a song about him. And as soon as I thought, then the words just landed immediately, really.
Yes.
Had to write the change bit, Barber, 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 that sort of thing. And then otherwise it's a very sort of simple song. We had a rehearsal on the Thursday before that gig, four of us. And I said, any chance can we work this out and play it on Saturday night? Yeah, let's do it. And we did it, and it went brilliantly. But it wasn't. So I sang it because I'd written it at that point.
Yes.
And I worked it out. So, but I don't think we thought it was going to last longer than that Saturday night.
Right.
We thought this is just a sort of jokey song that we've written for Johnny. But it just went down so well. And then someone recorded that gig, and somehow, and I don't know how, Martin got to hear that very quickly soon after the gig. Martin phoned me up and said, that song, Johnny D, said, who wrote that? Meaning, it can't possibly be yours. I said, yeah, that's ours. I said, I wrote that. And he said, that's got to be a single. And that was also what changed things for him with our relationship with Subway, because we released 2 7-inch singles. I think we were going to do another one, but there was never talk of an album. But suddenly he said, I want an album. So that song took us to that. But yeah, and that song, which I still cannot do a gig without playing it. And I don't care because I still love it. And Johnny D still loves the fact. I mean, it changed his life, that song. He was at a gig. He came and DJ'd at a gig at the 100 Club, and he brought one of his daughters along, and introduced me to his daughter and said to her, "You wouldn't be here if this man hadn't written a song about me," which is mind blowing.
God, that is
lovely because he was writing for the fanzine, and that led to Eleanor Levy, who at the time was with Andy Strickland. They were both working for Record Mirror. Eleanor Levy was looking around for some writers from the regions. I think my brother wrote for Record Mirror for a few months, but that didn't work out because he just wasn't really for him. But also asked Johnny D to start writing for Record Mirror. And that's when he moved up to London, and the rest is history, because I think he's still involved in working for various publishers and also behind the scenes. And
oh my God, that is so amazing.
It's wonderful to have done that. It's
yes.
Those are the things. Yeah.
God, that is a sliding doors kind of moment, isn't it? It's like
Well, he has said that he wrote some sleeve notes for our. He wrote the sleeve notes for our greatest hits, for our best of compilation. And yes, he talks about that as a sliding doors moment. Yeah.
It was a moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then this is 87, and obviously the band are absolutely cooking on gas. Then what's your next move? Is it the Because you've got this, is it an EP, Crocodile Tears, on those?
The Crocodile Tears was an album, but what had happened in the meantime was, and around the time Kettle came out, Brendan left the band. And we...
Was he fed up with it, or...?
No, but I think relationships, particularly between me and him, had become difficult. I did try and leave the band, actually.
Did you?
Yeah, I don't think I've really talked about this before, but it was because of the success of Johnny D. And Martin had actually said to me, I think he knew that maybe there was tension in the band. I always sing the praises of Brendan and say that period, it was like brilliant what happened.
Yes.
I think we were just getting on each other's nerves, I think, and that sort of thing. And he was doing things that, I wasn't happy about, and I probably was. I don't know. We were young.
Well, absolutely no. I mean, when you're that age, it's like you can't turn off from these dramas, can you?
I was doing this other little side thing with another friend of mine, Graham, called Edward's Box, with a cello and sort of Vinnie Riley sort of guitar. And Martin White had sort of alluded to, because I'd become a singer in the Chesterfields. And at start, I was just stepping forward to sing Johnny D. I said, when we recorded it, I said to Davey, I fully expected that Davey was going to sing it when we went into the studio, that I'd just sung it at that gig. Davey said, no, absolutely not. You have to sing that song. That was Davey's ego. It was the lack of ego, I think, that allowed me to do that, I think. And so that led to more songs eventually. But at that point, I was thinking maybe I could. And I know that we were doing really well. And I was, me and my girlfriend were doing record sleeves with people, everything. It was a really exciting time. But I saw, if I'm not getting on with Brendan, then maybe I should leave and do my own thing. And Martin had sort of mentioned that maybe he would at least put out a 7-inch single.
Yes.
Of Simon Chesterfield. Eventually now, last year, Simon Chesterfield as a brand has finally happened. But that could have happened then, and who knows what would have happened. But there was a band meeting that was sort of set up, and Davey. It was really, really awkward, but in the end, Davey said to me, "The Chesterfields is you and me." So they did the difficult thing of asking, Brendan,
blimey,
the band, which just felt awful at the time. And his parting remark was, "I bet this is because Simon wants his brother in the band." So that's why my brother, which really wasn't in my thoughts at all. He was living in London, and so that's why we didn't ask him immediately. and because we'd made contact with Andy Strickland, and he was sort of doing, I think he was getting the Caretaker race together, because it was after the Loft, who Davey and I, and actually Brenda, were big fans of.
Yes.
Davey egged me on and said, ring him up. Yeah, ask Andy if he'll do it. I said, Andy's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. But we were able to dangle a big carrot. I said, Andy, do you fancy helping us out for a few months? And we're playing Glastonbury Festival.
All right.
So we're playing the second stage at what became a few years later the NME stage. Really good slot. So yeah, that was quite a nice carrot.
Oh, because yes. So 87 was my first Glastonbury, and
did you see it?
I don't think I did. I saw the Bundy
We played
Boys
at lunchtime on the Friday, and it was the moment when the sun came out, because it was quite a wet weekend.
It was a wet weekend, and I definitely was getting stuck in traffic and getting lost, because I wanted to see Husker Du.
Right, yeah.
And I thought, God, they're going to, they're probably headline. And they played Friday afternoon, and it was like, oh, they've been and gone.
Wow.
But then I left on the Sunday and saw them at the Town and Country Club. So hurrah!
Right.
Because they were kind of my favourite band. Well, they were. There was a lot of bands, weren't they? Like you know,
wow.
but that I was a huge fan of the band.
Yeah, great. Yeah. I never got to see them.
But yeah, so was that the one where they had the Stonehenge of cars in Glastonbury that year? That was quite wild and freaky. I
don't know, because it was weird, because I'd been to Glastonbury every year, well, not every year, obviously, but for several years leading up to the year we played.
Yes.
And then I didn't experience it the same way at all, because we literally and we had a big gig the following day, it was a ball. It was the most we'd ever got paid for a gig. It was a ball at Oxford University.
Oh, nice.
I paid a lot of money, played with Desmond Dekker, sort of thing. A totally different gig to playing Glastonbury. So we were in and out. And I think Davey and I managed to get across to the main stage to see Julian Cope play.
Right.
But I think, apart from a few of the bands on our stage, we didn't see anything that year, because that's how it was weird experiencing in that way, and we had to wait around for a tractor to take us off.
Yes, it was muddy. I do remember thinking.
It was thrilling. It was very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. So then,
so Andy did that for a while, and also Rodney Allen helped us out, because he was local. He's a local boy, big fan, and we knew him going back several years. And he just learnt the set really quickly. And so if Andy couldn't do it, Rodney did it. And then, as we built towards Crocodile Tears, we asked Mark, and Mark moved back down here, and joined. So that became quite a different guitar sound, but that became the sound of obviously still Davey's guitar sound, but Mark added something different, and so I think Crocodile Tears does sound quite different too. And I think it was like where we went and worked with John Rivers in Leamington Spa, who produced a lot of records that we really loved the sound of, including Up the Hill and Down the Slope. And there was a Razor Cuts 12-inch recorded there, which sounded brilliant. So that's why we went to John Rivers. And within the band, do we want to carry on with John? But we'd been encouraged to set up our own label, Household, by the distributors, and they'd said they'd invest in us. So it meant that we could pay a bit more for the recording. So within the band, I think two of us wanted to stick with John, and two of us wanted to go and try sort of John Rivers.
Yes. And did you, at that stage, had you sort of got all the songs demoed and well rehearsed?
Mostly. I think there's a few extras that were released on Spotify recently, that we were probably writing in the studio. I don't think we were quite ready, but because there were three songwriters in the band suddenly, because Mark brought Alison Wait and Let It Go to that album, and there's actually only 10 songs on that album, whereas Kettle had 12. And Davey was still, pretty prolific. So I think between the three of us, we managed to get enough songs together for that album.
Did you tour that? Did you tour much on the back of that album?
We did. We played. We did a UK tour. There was going to be more, but then it all started going wrong, because we did Dom left the band because we'd been playing all these university gigs, because Dom was still only 16, 17, something. His parents had been amazing at letting him off school and come with us. Although John Parish did do one tour because he was doing his O-levels. We'd been playing the university and college circuit, and he was seeing all those places and wishing he'd gone.
Right.
So it got to the point, and we'd done the second album, we promoted it, we'd done a few promotional gigs, and he made the decision that was right for him. that he wanted to do that. So that's what he did. And he ended up actually in Oxford. I think he's probably still in Oxford. I am sort of in touch with him. I've got to, actually, I must put a copy of this in the posting.
Yes, my God.
So suddenly we didn't have a drummer, and we had the album come out. And again, it was the gigs were getting bigger. But we knew Rob Ellis, who was a friend of ours, who later would drum for PJ Harvey, but he was drumming for Automatic Lamini at the time, John's band. And he just stepped in and came and did the tour. And he's just like one of the world's best drummers. So we were so lucky that he stepped in and did everything that was required. He drums on Fool Is a Man.
Right.
And then we did a European tour with Rob. And then at the end of the tour, and we knew this had happened, Davey's girlfriend had got pregnant. And Davey decided that he should leave the band and sort of go back to his job and support Ellen. And they got married and Joe was born. And obviously, hindsight's a brilliant thing, because what we should have done was just stop for 2 or 3 months and then see where we were.
Yes.
Done that, Davey, it would have been a great lineup. The lineup, Davey, Rob, me, and Mark, never really happened, but it should have done because it was great. But we had an agent, and our agent had booked up gigs until the end of the year, and Mark and I were living off those gigs.
Yes. So
we split the set down the middle and chose the songs that we thought best suited our voices. Obviously, we both still had both singing quite a few of the songs by now. And he, so we went off and did those gigs to start off with Rob drumming and with another friend, Jamie, who was our driver some of the time, knew all the songs, helped us out as well. And then that lineup morphed again, still me and my brother with another drummer, Richard, and another guitarist, Phil, for a European tour. It just all started fizzling out. And the thing that I thought was always going to happen, that I was going to end up in a band with my brother co-writing, never happened. Because I was thinking that, but he really wasn't thinking that. Because I'm someone who writes songs and surrenders the idea to the band that says, "Oh, what can you do with this?" And if those are the right people, then it's exciting. Mark is very different. Mark writes a song, and he knows what he wants everything else to sound like on that song, which is brilliant. It's just a very different. So it never quite. And then Mark moved to Bristol, started another band, Grape. And it felt like we'd run its course. Grunge was happening, and suddenly people weren't bothered about the Chesterfields anymore anyway. And we weren't going to do that thing of going baggy, because that was happening too. So it just had a sort of tailed off. But I think we could have, if we'd stopped when Davey left, we could have maybe reinvented ourselves again.
Yes.
And then obviously we reformed a few years later when Vinyl Japan asked us to do an album. So, and that was fun. Yeah, but there you go.
What was it like then reforming for the Vinyl Japan record? Did you have the original lineup for that?
We did for half a day. We reconvened. So it wasn't the original lineup, but it was the Crocodile Tears lineup, which was the known lineup. So me and my brother Mark and Davey and Dom, we got together and we brought songs that we'd been writing on, and we played with other bands, some of them. We got together a recording studio in Yeovil with our friend Howard, who's going to engineer and record an album, and started rehearsing them. It was going well, and we were playing each other ideas and working on the songs. And then lunchtime, we went off for lunch. That was great. All excited because the deal we'd done with Vinyl Japan was we'll record this album if we can come and play in Japan.
Yes.
And Tets at Vinyl Japan said, Oh yeah, I've got a television personalities tour coming up. You can come and join that. It's brilliant. So that was all set up. So it was all exciting, and they were paying for everything. And so we came back from lunch, and we start take our coats off and plug guitars in again. We're just about to get ready to go, and then we sort of look across at Dom behind the drum kit, and he's still got his coat on. And he's just standing there, staring straight ahead. And so we're all looking at him, and he said, "I don't think I can do it." So he drummed with us in the morning and come for lunch with us and been part of the us getting excited about it. He decided he couldn't. Davey got really cross and upset, which was his reaction. We each had different reactions, and each of those reactions is shows you our personalities. I was thinking, oh God, how can I turn this into a positive? I'm gonna have to find someone else walking to, because that's how I do things.
Yes.
Always that way. My brother was already thinking, because his drummer in Grape, the band he was still in, Rich, he immediately thought Rich will do it.
Right.
So we let that happen, and we let Dom go.
God, this is like the making of that the Beatles' last album, isn't it? Where there was like George was always going home; they'd have to go knock on his door saying, "Please, can you come back?"
And then the next day, Rich arrived. It meant that I think we recorded every song to a click track, which I'm not sure about, but it made things sort of quicker because that's how they were recording. So it was like it was two members of Grape and me and Davey. I think we did a good job of that. Howard did a good job of the sound. There's a few good songs on there, but it's very much sort of put together. Lucky that there's enough. I think there's enough reasonable songs on there, but I don't think
And how did your Japan tour go with your TV personalities?
It was great. We'd gone back to that position of not being the headline band and just having a blast. It was phenomenal from start to finish, and Davey was so on it, electric, because he'd missed that. Because Mark and I had been doing our bands, and they had been putting his band Grape and my band Passenger had been putting records out, and we toured and we'd done things. Passenger had toured Europe, Grape had toured Europe, and Grape had even gone and played in Japan the year before Chesterfields did. So, but Davey was working as a printer at Yeovil College.
Yes.
And missing it. So I think of all of us, he was the one who really appreciated that. And I think you can just see that on his face. All the photos I've got of from that tour. He's just. I'm so glad that we got to do that again with him.
Yes. But this is like 94. This is where Britpop is absolutely happening.
Yeah.
You were there at the perfect time. How come you didn't think, actually, guys, they love guitar music. The people that watched us in the 80s are clearing up and making.
People who watched us in the 80s were in those Britpop bands.
Yes, well, precisely, they were the ones.
Bass player from Suede, what's his name? Richard Osman's brother, Matt Osman.
Yes.
Yeah, I found he used to come and see us, but I found his name on a guest list recently.
Right.
He came to see.
But didn't you think, look, the market.
Well, we didn't have management. So I think someone could have exploited that, but it wasn't going to be us. And I think maybe we just thought, and nothing was booked. We did a gig. We did a Water Rats gig in London that wasn't well promoted. And we didn't have our networks of letting people know about things. Of course, it's pre being able to let people know on Facebook and stuff. So it felt like Japan was brilliant, but it felt a bit like a damp squib back here. So we played the Water Rats in London, and like any previous Chesterfields gig there would have been packed out, but it was half full.
Right.
And then we did a festival in Bristol. It was like an all-dayer, charity all-dayer. And I think my other band I was playing in a band called Gear at the time. That's right. That's what they're and they got a better slot, and the Chesterfields were playing in the afternoon, and it just felt like things had moved on. And yeah, it was that time, and it was interesting. And all those young bands were, which I think it just, yeah, I don't think any one of us thought that was a good time to maybe try and
Right.
push through again. Yeah.
Even though Jarvis and Pulp had been knocking around for 10
Well, yeah,
years.
I mean, they were doing support gigs when we were doing gigs in the 84, 85, weren't they? They were
Yes.
always on posters everywhere you went, but never at the top it was always like plus Pulp. That's which is brilliant. Yeah.
So then that was 94. So then back to the normal bands and gigs.
Yeah, and not that much interest. I ran a label for a while called Hair. That was fun, but I'd become a father. And so I suppose like Davey, I was getting serious as well. So I knew I had to um, bring money in.
Yes.
So it's things like that really. But,
it was tricky. And then poor old, I mean, the most horrendous story, Davey gets hit and killed in a hit and run, doesn't he? Did you see him before that happened? Did you see him?
I'd seen him this summer. That was wonderful. He came to a little festival that I'd organised nearby. And then he phoned me out of the blue for no reason at all 2 weeks before the hit and run. And yeah, I went to visit his mum and dad recently. First time I'd seen them in 10 years. I took them, this was like last week.
Oh,
I
yes.
took them a copy of this. And it was so lovely to see them. They're fit and well, living back in Devon. They were in Oxford. And she knew that story that Davey had called me, because I think probably she remembered that from last time I saw her. I'd say, oh, yeah, Davey. And she thinks, I think she thinks of that's it. That's like not a supernatural sort of event, but it was like, yeah, of course Davey called you 2 weeks before it happened. He probably, and because a couple of other people said they'd been in touch with him. Yeah, but for me it was weird because another friend had died the year before, and he'd called me 2 weeks before he died.
Right. So
I said to people, "Stop calling. Don't call."
Yes. Oh God, I know. It's
that was what, and also people expected me to be, and I didn't mind because, and that was when you were having to phone people to tell people news and that sort of thing. So very early days of internet or that sort of thing. I think it was Howard, his friend who produced our third album, phoned me up and asked if I'd heard the news. So he was the one who told me. And then people were phoning me to ask if it's true. And I felt that it was, and I spoke to Davey's mum immediately. That was so hard. And she asked me to choose, would I select the music for the funeral? And I thought I probably would need to organise a get together maybe next summer or something. So we had an event where everyone came together and played Davey songs and things. But I think that really helped because it gave me something to be thinking about. Suddenly I had this role of letting people know what had happened. And then that's such an honour to choose the music for the funeral.
Yes.
And we chose there's an instrumental that we wrote called the Berlin Walk, that around the time of Flood,
Yeah.
the Violent Japan album. I think it ended up on a 12-inch. So it's on the best of, though, because we now think of it as one of the best. But it was like an instrumental, very sort of Eastern European spy thing. I don't know if you've heard it, but so we played that for the committal, and it was just perfect. And then when my mother died a few years ago, we played it for hers as well. And so now, and my daughter knows that it needs to be played when I'm, in the fullness of time.
Yes, that's
It's just become our
exactly.
music for that. But yeah,
Yes, that's such a sad story, isn't it, poor
yeah,
Davy?
lovely to see his parents sort of last week, because they are both him. And it was lovely just the afternoon with my friend Wayne, who also knew him, who plays bass in my current band. So we just spent the afternoon just chatting about Davy and finding out we all heard stories that we hadn't heard before. That was lovely. And finding out, and Davy never knew this, that he was related to Charlie Chaplin.
Wowza.
And someone in the family had done their family tree, and not too distantly either, I think. So, which is brilliant. And that sort of thought, yeah. I was saying that to Wayne on the way back in the car. Yeah, that's easy. There's not a big jump from Charlie Chaplin to Davy.
God, that's so nice, isn't it,
Yeah, it is.
to have those connections. And then you get the occasional gig, don't you? You do this sort of the NME C86
Yeah.
celebration in 2014, and then you get this big gig 2 years later. So was that were both of those quite a big thing to navigate emotionally with Davey, sadly
Yeah.
passed?
We so I was doing a band with Helen, who's still, she plays on everything. She's been playing on everything I've been doing since for about the last 15 or so years. We were doing a band called Design, and I can't remember who the promoters were for that NME C86 gig, but it was an all-dayer, and they got in touch and said, "Will the Chesterfields play?" And I'd always resisted that. And I know we did the Chesterfields without Davey, but still, I felt I can't do Chesterfields without Davey. And also, my brother couldn't be coaxed into it. I think I could have persuaded him. He says no, but he's just not interested in playing anymore. So I asked. They said, "Will the Chesterfields play?" And I said, "Could it be Design play the songs of the Chesterfields?" Which is a bit of a mouthful and doesn't look
Yes.
particularly good on the poster, but they agreed. They gave us a nice slot, but I knew I had to have someone in the band who brought the jangle. And so, I'd stayed in touch with Andy. Andy and I are really good friends, and we'd seen
Yes.
a lot over the years, and including getting our children together and that sort of thing. So I phoned Andy and said, "Do you fancy playing this gig?" So yeah, he came down, rehearsed, and so we did that gig as Design played the songs of the Chesterfields, and it went really well. And so I think we got offered a couple of other things, and I still wanted it to be Design play the songs of the Chesterfields. We did one in Glastonbury, then we did one somewhere else, and then Andy had been out to play. The Loft had reformed to go and play New York Pop Festival, and Maz, who ran that, had said to Andy, I think he knew about the connection. He said, "I'd love to get the Chesterfields to come and play," and he sort of promised us a really good slot, which I think it was one of the best slots of the whole festival, playing the Saturday night just before in the best venue just before the Primitives. And he, and he said, "Yeah, I'll ask him." So I got in touch with Maz, and Maz said, "Love you to come and play." I said, "Great." He said, "But it's got to be called the Chesterfields. I'm not putting." So I negotiated Design also, because obviously it was going to be the four of us again, but Design got to play on the Friday. Was it the Friday? But an earlier slot in one of the other venues as part of the.
Yes.
He wouldn't have booked us otherwise. And then so we went over and we were the Chesterfields again, and it was and it felt like the Chesterfields. And then when COVID happened, and we did a few other gigs in the UK. I think we went Preston and Manchester and a few things that we were asked to do that we wanted to do. The little run. AGMP organised a little run of gigs, but we weren't really. It was just, if we fancy it, go off and do a few gigs and play. No new songs or anything. And then COVID and happened, and suddenly I had lots of time to write, as did Andy and Helen, and the song started landing. And I'd been in touch with Helmut Herr who runs a label in Germany, Mr. Mellow's Music, and he said he'd put out an album if we recorded an album, which is brilliant. And he also does all the online magic.
Yes.
So that album came together, and luckily Helen works at a flower farm, and they have a big barn, so we were actually able to rehearse at a distance from each other, and recorded as soon as we could. And then John Parish became involved in that again, which was lovely, come full circle. And I think it felt like and sounds like a Chesterfields album, because the Chesterfields were all. It wasn't like we were a band with one lead singer, Davey, and that was it. There were always other voices and always like different things coming in from elsewhere. Particularly like Mark joined, it'll be like slightly different. So it felt, Andy's songs feel great on the album, and even Helen's song on the album sort of fits in. So I think we did and people have said, it sounds like the Chesterfields. And there's a song on there that's about Davey. So
yes,
but
that's kind of quite beautiful, actually, isn't it? And
and also got to talk to Davey's mum about that last week, and she loves it. And I gave her. She hadn't got a copy. I gave her a copy of the 7-inch.
God, that's amazing.
It's quite special, because I had involved them. The last time I had seen them was when I was sounding them out and Davey's brother about whether I would do the Chesterfields again and call it the Chesterfields. And they said, because we'd had the offer from New York, and they also said, well, you're going to New York and you're playing Davey's songs. Yeah, of course you should do that as the Chesterfields. So it was great. Last week I got to tell Davey's mum, because she's, they're Yeovil. They were very Yeovil based when we got the band together. I've got a fondness for the town, and Davey's sister's just moved back to Yeovil. That when we announced from the stage, this is last train to Yeovil, on stage in New York, there was a big cheer.
Excellent. God, that's
so good for what, really?
Well, it's nice to sort of, when you think about it, it's nice to keep the spirit alive, isn't it? I mean, it's emotionally difficult to navigate, let's face it, but at the same time, I think one would regret, in 10 years' time not having done those things, because you think,
absolutely,
because actually, it's kind of special. And yes, but then after that, this is your next the solo project where you reimagined. I know, because I was a massive Joni Mitchell fan, and I know that she did something like this, I think years ago, but it's now decades, isn't it? Where she reimagined quite a lot of her songs, which were very different vibe, because it was very kind of almost spoken word, and it was much more depressive, actually.
Yeah. Well, there was a song on that Chesterfields album called "The Waiting Room." And so while I was sitting here in lockdown writing those songs, I wrote about 5 bass lines for that song. And obviously it didn't make sense to have them all on the album, because it needed to sound like a band song. I think there's a couple of bass lines on there, and Helen plays one of the tunes on the guitar. But it lodged a thought in my mind that I wanted to hear them all as string parts. And maybe I was capable of working with someone who could orchestrate some songs. But it's a scary thought, but I was really drawn to that. And so when the Chesterfields played 2 summers ago now, so it was the last Chesterfields gig with that lineup, we played a festival in Norway called Indiefjord,
Oh, yes.
which we got through the song on the album, mostly the song Mr. Wilson Goes to Norway. That had sort of got played on national radio in Norway, and so we got invited to play the festival. And the highlight of the festival apparently was us playing that song, and then we came back, and I think we'd all been thinking, what's next? I think Andy probably knew the Loft were going to reconvene, which they have, and they've recorded their debut album hilariously.
Yes.
And so that's all happening. So I would have come back knowing we had no plans, is what I'm saying. And I think, frustratingly for Rob, our drummer, he'd like to have known that there were more things coming up. He knew I was thinking about doing the strings thing.
Yeah.
And I think he knew that Andy, because Andy was playing us in Norway, he was playing bits of songs that he'd been writing for himself. And maybe we think he was going to do a solo album as well. So Rob left the Chesterfields the day after we got back. He just wanted to know. He just wanted to make a decision. And that sort of really kick-started me being Simon Chesterfield, I think, because I thought I wanted to do and I started thinking more about that because I'm a big fan of Scott Walker.
Yes.
I really liked the fact that he left the Walker Brothers and he didn't become Scott Engels or Engel for his solo career. He was still Scott Walker. And I thought, yeah, I fancy doing that. And that also sound-wise, I took a few leads from when I got together with the guy who orchestrated the album. I sent him some links to a few things, and there's a few Scott Walker things in there. That's where I sort of wanted it to go. But it was the whole thing was, and I knew Helen. I mean, Helen's just will get involved whenever I ask her to do anything. So she was involved, but not in the same way. So the guy who'd engineered and co-produced the Chesterfields album has a studio in Wales, and he knew this chap called Charles Harrison, who'd been in there with orchestras and he'd orchestrated things, and said, you two ought to get together. So I got together with him, and then it was just we're thinking about orchestrating that one song, The Waiting Room. But then it became, why, if we're going to do this, maybe it should be more than that.
Yes.
And then he told me how much he was going to charge. It's like, oh God, can I afford this? It's not like bands where there's no money and everyone's just doing it because they want to do it. And if there is some money, that's brilliant. But if not, you're doing it.
Yes.
So I had to think about that, and I also had to. So he was writing the string parts, sort of keyboard and MIDI, sort of, so that we could hear what they're going to sound like. And then went into the studio and started getting rhythms and things like that. And meanwhile, I thought 6 songs is nice. It could be like a 6-song, 10-inch EP, that sort of thing, because I've never done a 10-inch, and suddenly I've done 2.
Yes, I know. This is very impressive.
Yeah, I do like a 10-inch. What was scary when he worked with anyone, I suppose, was that I didn't know whether he'd pick up on my melody ideas, because when you write a song, you're totally dependent on whether other people share the same melodic things and they could go in the right direction or totally in the wrong direction. It's like Davey always went in the right direction or an unexpected direction, which is both of those are perfect. And Helen the same. But I have worked with the guitarists and other musicians where you think, no, this isn't right at all. So I was very aware that, particularly working with a sort of classically trained musician, that it might not work. And then I started hearing his ideas, and they just sounded great. And then he said, of course, if you want this to sound good, and Ben in the studio was the same good, then we probably have to get some proper strings players in. And so I had to think about, and that was like £600 for the cello player. And oh boy, he came along, and the parts were all written out, and he just went in, played them beautifully in one take. And I was worried about what's he going to be like? The whole thing was like really unnerving but exciting. And
Yes.
same for Ben in the studio because he was like learning things as well. Um, but this guy, the cello player, he'd done a kid's prom, a lead cello in the kids' prom at the Albert Hall the night before or something. But he turned up in a Nirvana t-shirt, and just I thought immediately, this is going to be all right. And he was
Right.
in that
Yes.
mood. And what he's put down on those songs is pretty much the feel of the whole thing. So then Helen and I went in. I asked Helen to come along when I was doing the vocals, but Ben said Rob Ellis, who we were mentioning earlier,
Hmm.
who's gone on to work with Marianne Faithfull and various sort of, obviously PJ Harvey and that sort of thing. He'd heard that I was in the studio doing something with strings and said, could he come along and have a listen? Um, I said, yeah, that'd be great. He arrived right at the moment I was singing the most wallowy moment of one of the songs. And Ben pushed, said, Rob's here. Oh, God. Rob started co-producing it immediately because I think that's how he works. I thought he was just coming to listen. Um, and so I went into the control room and he's saying, yeah, that was good. And Ben, can we just hear that bit again there? And that's what he does. And we surrendered to that. And he was just fully on board from that moment to the point where we've got some amazing drumming on there of his, and it's just right.
Right.
He listens to the songs. He doesn't listen. He just as a whole. So he got very involved, and it just went up another level. And then so we finished, and then the scary thing was saying to my record label, to Helmut, would he be interested in putting it out? Because it doesn't sound like the Chesterfields. I met him in London. I gave him a memory stick with it on, and I didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. I thought, oh, this isn't going to happen. But he just hadn't had a chance. And then
Yes.
he just got in touch and said, Capitals, let's do this.
Oh, amazing.
So that happened. And then the other thing that happened was, so I put a band together. I've got a loose arrangement of musicians, so I can't be sure that everyone's available because they all do other interesting things. But then we got invited by a Dutch label to do that, which is our Christmas single.
Oh, yes. This is your
I'd had this dream. This is true. I woke up one morning absolutely convinced that Last Train to Yeovil had become Last Train to Christmas. I could hear it. I could hear the bells and the whole sound of it. And so this guy, Robert, runs the Snowflake Singles Club label. Look, lovely white vinyl.
beautiful.
He'd got in touch and asked if the Chesterfields would do a Christmas single. He releases a few every year. And I sort of said, well, we can't do it this year. And then he asked again. And I said, well, the Chesterfields is not doing anything this year, but would you be interested in Simon Chesterfield doing something? And I've mentioned the Scott Walker thing, and I think that's, oh, yes, you still have some of that. But the deal is you have to do a cover, which is a very unusual thing for me to sort of do. So, but with the help of the band, we managed to sort of get together what I think is a really lovely version of I Believe in Father Christmas for the Beast.
Gee, that is brilliant. That is so good.
So that's all happened. So suddenly Simon Chesterfield is a thing now. That wasn't really the intention. So everything I'll do now will be probably under that name because it won't be the Chesterfields. I have said to Andy, I don't think I can do the Chesterfields again if he isn't involved. I mean, maybe at some stage, but I'm getting on a bit, and I'm really enjoying like doing the Simon Chesterfield thing because it doesn't have to just be the Chesterfields, although half the set is obviously going to be.
So does that mean you got some dates and live shows coming up?
Well, we've been booked for the Sherborne Summer Festival on Saturday, the 14th of June. It's on a bandstand in Sherborne, right next to the railway station. We played it last year. It was really great. It was great last year because Dom's mum turned up. Hadn't seen her for years, and she's just sitting in the front there watching us. And when we played Last Train to Yeovil, the train went past.
Oh,
To
nice.
Yeovil. It was amazing.
That was, I know.
Yeah, it was a lovely day. So yeah, that's the only thing booked at the moment. But I've got in New Year, I had some new songs landed. So think we've been working on work. So hopefully we'll do some more recording soon and get. I'd like to get like another 7-inch single out.
Yes. Do
Like,
you have a
yeah,
studio now at home, or do you sort of go elsewhere?
So my friend Wayne, who's playing bass in the band, is also like a really great guitarist. We record ideas at his place on his home sort of studio, and then take them to Ben. And so Ben, who runs the studio, is also my drummer.
Right.
That's worked out well. So yeah, so that's the next step.
And obviously, and then Precious Recordings as well, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. I wonder. I would imagine that's going to be one of their hot sellers, isn't it? Really?
Well, I don't know
Oh, is it? Has it been released, or is it being released?
which one.
The Chesterfields Janice Long session, is that
Yeah,
now
it
out?
is out. The record shop in Sherborne says it's not been distributed yet, but I think that's because they're wanting to sell. I think he likes to sell a lot of copies via Bandcamp
Right.
first. It's on. He's done a deal with the BBC. He does gets good deals off the BBC. We were quoted for this a lot of money a few years ago and prohibitive. But because he does it regularly, I think he gets a good deal with them, reasonable price for putting them out. But he also puts them, so all 4 songs are on Spotify as well. So he's obviously licensed them for that. He just does everything properly.
Yes, I know. It is.
The vinyl is really chunky.
It is. I like the fact that they've got all the same design. Actually, I think they do work such a treat. So I do think that is kind of genius. Actually,
I do like that. Apart from, for some reason, Blue Boy are allowed to break away from that design when they release stuff.
that's just cheeky, isn't it? Really. I mean, it's funny, isn't it, actually, when you start looking around for things. Yes, so look, this is fantastic.
Yes.
Well, thank you for your time, Simon. If you want, I can send you the link and then you put it on your social media platform sites, because obviously
Certainly.
it would be great to, sort of hear more of, well, hopefully more people will hear more of your sort of solo work and what's happening now, because actually it's great. I mean, I think it's always brilliant that people are doing new stuff and are trying to desperately get another project done. And in a way, playing live. I mean, there are these festivals, aren't there, like Shine and Bits and Pieces, which are probably absolutely fine. But making a new album is always exciting.
Yes, I mean they're both exciting for different reasons. I enjoy both. Some people enjoy one more than the other, or don't enjoy one and enjoy the other. But I really enjoy. I just love every second of doing any of it. Really.
Yes, and actually, it's interesting. What's the Spotify monthly listening? Actually, he says.
What for the Chesterfields, or because Simon Chesterfield has his own Spotify page, and the numbers are nothing like for the Chesterfields. Chesterfield's pretty good, I think.
Yes, I wonder what I did. Just God, this is quality radio. This is.
Well, my granddaughter's disappointed that we don't get Beyonce's numbers. She's been
no. See, Johnny D's nearly been played 100,000 times.
Is that good? See, it sounds good.
It sounds fantastic, doesn't it?
When you think that it's all the songs are also on other platforms as well, I have no idea what the other ones are.
It's a mystery, isn't it? Really, let's face it. But
yeah, no, that's good. It's weird that if you look at the all-time numbers, that Mr. Wilson Goes to Norway is in the all-time numbers is 4th and catching up on Shame About the Rain. I don't know what's happened with that song. Maybe it was the radio play in Norway, but for some reason that song, and it's the same with the video on our YouTube channel, that song is being played and loved by people, and I don't know where those people are. And we had someone turned up with the gig we did at Christmas. We had a couple, and I would say they were in their 50s. They got up and danced to Mr. Wilson Goes to Norway, and just clearly having a ball, because nobody at that point, no one had started dancing. And they left. That was why they'd come. We didn't see them again. They came to see us play that song, and then they left. So maybe they had I don't know, a meal arranged or something like that. But it was obvious because they got up. It's like, this is the song.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm so
It is
bizarre.
fantastic, but they could at least have stuck around to hear some of the others.
Yeah, I know. You'd want to sort of hear it, just like, excuse me, before you leave, just, I don't mind you don't like the band, or, it's just, we'd be just curious why. Being
And
that,
we did a gig in HMV in Yeovil and played that song. It was the first Simon Chesterfield sort of outing, and these people came. They had no idea that we'd even play that song because it was billed as Simon Chesterfield, but we did. And then after we played it, the mother pointed out that this lad, who was probably in his 30s, she said, that's our song. She said, this is Mr. Wilson. And he did go to Norway, and that's where he met his girlfriend. So it was like they thought we'd written the song about him.
Mr. Wilson goes to Norway. There was a David Bowie, wasn't there? Which his girlfriend Hermione went to. Song for Norway. Sorry, that's nothing like Mr. Wilson Goes to Norway. But look, I'll let you go on. But thank you ever so much for your time. This has been amazing.
Yeah, I've loved it, and thank you for inviting me again. So
yes, no, it's good. I'll send you a link as well.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Simon. Take care.
Okay. All right.
See you later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
I know, so much to remember, digest and contemplate. That was me in conversation with Simon Barber from the Chesterfields, and also goes by the name Simon Chesterfield. Yes, I will put links to those various bits and pieces in the notes. The C86 show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on all those social media platform sites. It's not that tricky. Anyway, and all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, so just check it out. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.